Welcome back to another Medtech Snapshot. With me today is a good buddy of mine and long-term client. I've had an opportunity to work with Jeff for a number of years, is Jeff Kasalko, VP of R&D. So Jeff and I are going to get into some interesting discussions today about how do you fast-track your product development efforts, especially if you have a 510K device, Class 2 device. How do you move that along as quickly as possible to get into clinical trials? We're also going to hit Jeff with a surprise question, so stay tuned. All right, Jeff, I'm excited. This has kind of been a long time coming here, so welcome.
This has been, yes. Thanks for having me. This is great.
So I'm curious. You've been through early stage startups. Several times. You're in one right now. So what I would love to know is, and maybe I'll start it off by kind of giving you a little bait here. I have seen that a Class 2 device, 510K device, moderate risk, to go from concept really to start getting into your kind of first clinical trials, we're looking anywhere from like 18 months to 36 months. And I recognize that's double the time frame from the low end to the high end. But what type of advice or direction do you have for people who are listening right now on how they can fast track their product development process, especially if they have a 510K Class 2 device, and hopefully try to get closer towards that 18-month or maybe 2-year mark getting into clinicals?
Sure. No, it's a great question, and I think the time frame sounds about right from what I've experienced, both where I'm at now and at previous projects. I'm not going to claim to have the magic answer to this this problem. I can tell you how we're working on things now, and give you kind of a perspective on what we're focusing on being the critical activities. I can kind of think of 3 off the top of my head. One of those being clinicians. If you're starting off in an early stage, really partnering with the right group of clinicians. We've got a great partnership with key, vascular and interventional radiologists, and really working with them closely. And one of the things that we found working with them is really understanding, identifying your site, and really understanding what does that site need to get into that clinic. You're focusing on a handful of sites. What does that site need? What do you need to get through the ethics boards? What kind of testing do you need to present? And make sure you really have that understood so you can go into those activities with, a high level of confidence that you're going to be presenting the information that those boards want to see. I found that to be very, very helpful in projects we've done in the past. And then just working closely with those physicians, getting them involved early on with the device. How are they going to be successful? Things that are really concerning to you as an engineer might be different from a physician's perspective. And so as you're in those early stages of development, what is going to help them be successful while still achieving your design goals?
Can you talk real quick maybe about the internal functions, right? So what you've referenced so far are your external partners, right? Which is so important for that feedback, the usability and so forth. But what about internal? Everything, when we're talking about trying to move product development through the process and through the development phases quicker, have you seen anything that has either A, held people back because maybe they made short-sighted decisions, or B, like for example, overengineering comes to mind right now in this discussion. So rather than me continue to seed it, what are your thoughts on that?
No, and that's exactly where I was going to go with that. I think the 2 things that come to mind as you were asking that is, understanding your risks and do not overengineer it. You're going to very first clinical experience. You're going to learn a ton from the clinic, things that you probably didn't even anticipate in some instances. So really understanding what your key patient risks are. Patient safety is first and foremost as you go into these early stage activities. Focusing on your core design risks, your core procedural risks, really looking at how is this device going to function, what does it need to do, and how is the user going to use it. And then avoiding that unending engineering urge to do more. Sometimes you need to step back and really focus on what are those essentials and have the right team around you to make sure everyone's focused on that goal. We're not developing a commercial product at this stage. We're developing a product to understand its functionality, its patient experience, the overall clinical experience, and just making sure it has that clinical utility that we think it does, at least on the bench from all of our testing. So really focusing on that. And again, knowing your users, going back to your clinicians and making sure that you're achieving those goals with them. So we're not, we're all on the same page as we're working towards that clinical experience.
So a comment you just shared, which I agree with, is, look, right now we're not developing a commercial product. Agreed. However, at what point in the development phase do you really think it's appropriate for us as an organization and a startup to really start thinking about DFM activities?
Absolutely. And I mean, fortunately, I've had enough experience that's always somewhere in my mind as I'm moving forward. But I think getting past some of those, very early clinical experiences, making sure that you've got that clinical, functionality that you intended from the bench experience. I think early. I think you really do need to think about that early, because once you prove your clinical utility, things are probably going to accelerate pretty quickly. Your investors are going to want to see things improve. You're going to want to be treating more patients. You're going to want to be making that device better. So I think, after some of those early clinical experiences, I think starting to feed in some of that DFM and starting to really think of, you're not going to address all of it right now, but make sure you have, your eyes on sort of that future state and work towards it.